is Brannon Howse Live. Whether the issue is law, science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, religion, government, or national security, Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
And welcome to the broadcast. Tonight, we're going to be joined by Hadiya. You guys know Hadiya Mohammadi. She's going to join us. She was inside the government and intelligence arena. She's going to share with us tonight who are some of these folks. There's another name. There's another name that's come up of someone in the orbit of the Trump administration. I asked her to look into him to see what she says. This gentleman said, when I die, I want them to say I was Palestinian. This is the American mediator between Hamas and the U.S. What do we know about him? I don't know much about him. That's why I asked Hadiya to look into him. Okay? We're also going to be joined tonight by, let's see, who else do we have here, boys? Oh, yes, Carl Teichrib is going to join us. Carl is a Canadian, and he's also an expert on transhumanism, globalism, using technology to control us. He just went to a conference in Dayton, Ohio, of a bunch of the globalists, okay? And he's going to tell us what they're saying. What are they saying about the Trump administration, a North American Union, the European Union, dividing the world into various regions like 10 unions, like the Bible actually talks about in Daniel and Revelation? Well, he was there in Dayton last week, and he's going to share with us what these world leaders are saying. Here's the question. Is Donald Trump pushing us toward a North American Union? And if so, is he doing so because he feels like that's the only way to save America from economic collapse? To merge the land and the assets and the minerals of America, Canada, and Mexico together and put them on a ledger and let that offset the debts of the nations. Is this what he's going for? Now, I've been warning about a North American Union, but the Bible seems to describe a world of 10 unions. So it seems like it's inevitable. But is President Trump doing it not because he has nefarious plans, but he sees this as really the only way to merge our economies, the labor of Mexico, the minerals of Canada, the hydroelectricity of Canada, and we bring this into America, including this golden dome for protection, and use that to back America's currency. So let's talk to Carl Teichrib about that. Also, Israel's saying Canada is not a safe place for the Jews. Why does Carl Teichrib think the Israeli government's saying that? We'll ask him about that. Wes Peters, Michael Weiner. I want to play some clips tonight from a speech given the other day by Vice President Vance about going toward cryptocurrencies. He says the cryptocurrencies will allow for decentralization. It'll allow for a hedge against bad policies and inflation. It'll allow for a hedge against the private sector doing debanking, you know, the cancel culture. He says it'll be a hedge against the elite's ability to control us. He said this is why we need Bitcoin and other things. I'm not a Bitcoin guy, but he says we do need alternatives, it looks like, to the Federal Reserve System. Is this how they're going to neuter the elite, the deep state? And then you add in tariffs, which can become an external revenue service versus the crooked internal revenue service, right? Let's get into all that tonight. I'll play some clips from J.D. Vance. And then let's talk with Dr. Bashima Williams. I want to talk about a couple things. I want to talk about people being overweight. What happens when people are overweight? What starts to happen to your body? So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. taking away what's now being said to be about, what, $700 million contract from Moderna for the bird flu, so-called vaccines. Why is he doing it? I'm glad he is. You'll find out why he's doing it. 700 million. And then I want to play a clip for you of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talking to John Stossel. Because there are so many young people in medical school today that are being so brainwashed on how wonderful the MMR vaccines, measles, mumps, rubella, or how your brand new infant child, only hours old, needs a hepatitis B shot. Got a little story. Visited with a young man I've known since he was a teenager. Now he's in his last year of medical school. He started telling me how great vaccines are, and hepatitis B and MMR. I'm not a doctor. I'm not in medical school. Never went to medical school, but I seem to know more about the topic than he did. Shocker, right? You guys know more about it than this third-year medical student. I'll tell you about that conversation. I'll share that with Dr. Bashima Williams. We'll get into that. Some very interesting topics tonight, for sure. All right, before we get started, Melissa just brought me, I don't know if you saw her off the corner of the studio there, just brought me my Gatatana. Why don't you go to let's see, where is it, folks? I got to bring it up here. Go to worldviewtube.com/sponsors. That's where you'll find them all. worldviewtube.com/sponsors. There's Gatatana. All right, you know it. I drink it every day. Half a scoop on Dolly's food. 1 scoop is the equivalent of 90 billion plant cells. I have told you the story over and over again about Tom Harper. Given a terminal diagnosis, starts eating the phytoplankton he's raising for his shellfish, starts feeling better, pain goes away. They go to the doctor, they do 11 biopsies, and they all come back benign. The guy was given a terminal diagnosis, goes on to live another 10 years, retires to Hawaii. From that, Dave Hunter starts Global Plankton Alliance, which you can find out more about at melissahousegpa.com. melissahousegpa.com. There are clinical trials behind this. It's great for you. It's great for your fur baby. All of the details are there. melissahousegpa.com. melissahousegpa.com. All right. Now, you know, I take my Bella Grace every day. It's the power of 3, the Bella Grace, the Gatatana, and the Numi. You know I take the Bella Grace every day. And I was talking to a friend last night. He was talking about his horrific acid reflux. And Melissa was like, well, Brannon had that for years too. He had to sleep sitting up. But that all ended in December of 2023 when I got him on Bella Grace. He hasn't taken a Pepsid since. I'm like, she's right. She's right. He was just talking about how horrific it is. And so we're encouraging him to get on Bella Grace. And so many of you are. It's a powerful elixir, 3 ingredients, 80 clinical trials. We have so many of you that have a subscription to this, and you keep the subscription. Why? Because it works for you where you need it, like it works for me. So you not only get this great elixir, the skincare that Melissa loves, the weight management, that's an all-natural, plant-based management, which is also, according to the studies, great for your cardiac health. There's the restorative sleep gummies. All of this, melissahousebg.com, melissahousebg.com. These are great ways to support us and I think also support your health at the same time. So I do hope you'll do that, okay? All right. That's going right to the cellular level, that Gatatana is. Then don't forget about Swish for Life. This is Gatatana. Excuse me, gluten. No, not gluten. This is your Swish for Life, which is got glutathione. Thank you. Got it right. Glutathione. And it's super powerful. Detoxes your cells. Some studies show it may remove mercury from your brain, helping to prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. So these are the three things I do every day. My Gatatana, my glutathione, my Bella Grace. You'll find all the links at worldviewtube.com/sponsors, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Remember we did a story the other night on microplastics? And how many processed foods have microplastics? So many contaminants in the air, food, water. You need to make sure you're detoxing. This is your maintenance thing, all right? The Gatatana and the Bella Grace, you're like, oh, I'm getting great results. I can see that. I know. Now, the Swish for Life, the glutathione, it's one of those things where you're like, I don't know if it's doing anything. But it's the thing that you want to do because you don't want to find out 10 years from now, oh, no, I got dementia. Onset of dementia. I should have been using that glutathione Howse was promoting all the time. So this is one of those things you do as your preventative maintenance. Swishforlife.com, swishforlife.com. All right, let's get going. Join me now is Hadiya Mirhamadi. She is going to be one of our keynote speakers at our upcoming national conference this fall, October 3rd and 4th. That's a Friday night and a Saturday, October 3rd and 4th in the Mid-South here. Beautiful theater in Collierville, where we're based. Only 350 seats available. Tickets are only $99. We lowered the price drastically. We're able to cut a lot of our costs down by moving it to the Mid-South. And so we're passing that savings on to you. Seating is limited if you want to be with us in person. So check it all out, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. I wanted to ask Hadiya about this article right here. When I die, I want them to say I was Palestinian. This is Bishar Bahaba, the American mediator between Hamas and the U.S. Subtitled, Delusion by Biden and Harris, he backed Trump in the presidential election and helped the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas draft a congratulatory message while still publicly criticizing Trump's Gaza plan. Baba, who came to the U.S. as an immigrant in the 1970s, now serves as a back channel between Hamas and Washington while bypassing Israel. My children were born in the U.S., but I registered them with UNRWA. That's the UN. All right. This is the second, at least the second, concerning character floating around the Trump administration. I asked Hadiya if she would come on and give us a report about this and more. She joins us now. Hadiya, thanks for being back with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join you again.
Thank you. Tell me about this. Or what did you find out about this guy?
Okay, so if you will indulge me, I want to take your listeners back to the Bush administration because this tale goes back that far. So if you recall, I don't know how much you may have talked about this with your listeners about the Holy Land Foundation trial and all the raids. So there was all these reports. Did you follow that? So there was all these reports we talked
all about that. You know, they're raising money. One's like the largest terrorist funding trial in American history, and then Obama stopped it.
Okay, so basically that was this cabal of Palestinian-born, for the most part, activists that were fighting for not just the Palestinian cause, but the Ikhwan cause. So what the trial was trying to demonstrate and what the Operation Green Quest raid of IIIT and Safaf Trust back in 2003 was uncovering was this civilizational jihad plan of the Brotherhood in the United States. Some of those, so they gained influence in the Bush administration through a number of key characters. One of whom was Sohail Khan, who was a staffer for President Bush and a key liaison. His father, Imam Mahbub Khan, was the head of the Santa Clara Mosque, where Ayman Zawahiri had fundraised at least 2 times. That's actually when my career started because I was outside that Santa Clara Mosque interviewing people that were basically being recruited to go fight jihad in Afghanistan and Bosnia. And I was trying to discover why in the world would American-born Muslims be interested in that? And that's actually when my relationship with the FBI started. So those investigations dated back to the mid 90s. Sohail Khan comes and works for the president, President Bush. And on the outside, we have Grover Norquist of the Americans for Tax Reform, whose wife is a Palestinian, a Muslim Palestinian, and Khalid Safori. They create the Islamic Institute. So Islamic Institute becomes this freeway for all of these men to basically get involved with the president, to get involved in politics, to be inserted in key staff roles, get internships and what have you. And that influence is basically the beginning of this kind of radical Palestinian effort inside the US government. And the seeds of that kind of remain. So when I go to investigate, who is this Mr. Baba? Because historically he was a Democrat. So he wasn't involved. Khalid Safori, Grover Norquist, access to Karl Rove, all of this was Republican. Mr. Baba apparently was historically a Democrat. But he aligns with Mossad Bolis, who is President Trump's daughter's father-in-law. So Tiffany marries Michael Bolis, and then Mossad Bolis is his father. And so Mossad Bolis somehow gets connected to Baba, not entirely clear how that happens. But the two of them, together with Richard Grenell, start doing this massive outreach to Arab Americans. And this is right before the Trump campaign. There's a meeting in May between Richard Grenell and all of these cast of characters. And the reason I bring up the other guys is because they were at the meeting as well. Khalid Safori was at that meeting. There's about 40 Arab American activists. I recognized about 4 or 5 of those names, and they were literally all from this 2000 era. So for 25 years, these men have been doing this activism, and that continuum exists in terms of it being like a pro-Hamas, pro-Ikhwan organized group.
Whoa. So let me go back real quick. Grover Norquist.
Yes.
There's been controversy about Grover Norquist related to his association with Islamists for years, correct?
For years, I was personally involved in some knockout, drag-out fights between Khalid Safori's group and my group, and us saying that they were linked to terrorists and them saying we were deviant heretics. And it's been a back and forth for years. I actually had a private meeting for David Frum, who actually reported about this stuff that Grover Norquist was doing in his book. He was a speechwriter for Bush. And so I explained this problem. He also referred to it in his book when he published a book about his experiences in the White House. And I actually get sequestered by the Secret Service. They show up at my house, 3 SUVs, tell me to get in the car, drive me off to an undisclosed location and keep me in there for 3 hours, basically telling me to prove that Sohail Khan represents a threat to the president.
Wait a minute, back up. They wanted you to say what?
So because I was so outspoken about this problem, I knew who Sohail Khan's dad was. I knew his relationship to these Brotherhood and Palestinian groups. I knew about their terror recruiting for Ayman al-Zawahiri. So when I was talking about this with various U.S. officials and members of Congress, I get called in by the Secret Service to explain why I was telling people Sohail Khan was a threat to the president. So I did not tell people he was a physical threat. I was trying to explain he was an ideological threat.
And so what were they asking you to sign?
Well, they were asking me to prove it. So here I am trying to explain to some people. I don't know what they knew about counterterrorism. I don't know what they knew about the Islamic Jihad movement, but I am explaining like 200 years of history to these guys. And so at one point during this interview, they look at me and they're like, is this a lover's dispute? I just said to myself, oh my goodness, if that's all you've gotten out of everything I've just said, then I don't think we're ever going to get anywhere with this conversation, because they literally could not wrap their heads around what I was saying, because, there's so many degrees of separation between the first guys and the second guys, and explaining why this son of this other gentleman would have been a problem. And I tried to explain the relationships and these investigations that are ongoing, but I didn't get anywhere.
Wow. Now, did President Bush, George W., ever come to learn about this himself?
I mean, I would suspect so. There was enough people who knew about it, but I think from what I recall back in those days, the largest obstacle was Karl Rove. And so President Bush really trusted Karl Rove, and Karl Rove basically had green-lighted these groups, whether it's from his own relationship or because of Grover. That's not entirely clear to me still to this day, but it was very difficult. I mean, Sohail Khan was eventually moved out of the White House. But his career still continues. I looked him up. He's still involved in various Republican activities. So it wasn't like it was a career destroying moment. But at one point, so Operation Green Quest, 2003, the raid of IIIT and the Safa Trust, there are tax return records that had over $1.2 billion that went through those organizations. So we're not talking a small amount of money. There was giant slush funds that were going God knows where, because, you know, as a private citizen, you can't really figure that out where it went. But that raid never really came to anything. And so it's not really clear what happened as a result of those investigations. I mean, Sami al-Arian, who was the professor at University of South Florida, he eventually got deported.
Look at this I found, November 11th, 2001. This is at newrepublic.com. Grover Norquist's strange alliance with radical Islam. On the afternoon of September 26, George W. Bush gathered 15 prominent Muslims and Arab Americans at the White House. With cameras rolling, the president proclaimed the, quote, teachings of Islam are teaching of peace and good, end quote. It was a critically important moment, a statement to the world that America's Muslim leaders unambiguously reject terror committed in Islam's name. Unfortunately, many of the leaders present hadn't unambiguously rejected it. To the president's left sat Dr. Yahya Basaha, president of the American Muslim Council, an organization whose leaders have repeatedly called Hamas freedom fighters. Also in attendance was Salam al-Maharati, I'm sure I'm not getting these right, executive director of the Muslim Public Affairs Council, who on the afternoon of September 11th told the Los Angeles public radio audience that, quote, we should put the state of Israel on the suspect list, end quote. And sitting next to the President Bush was Muz Amil Sirqui, how do you say that? President of the Islamic Society of North America.
Siddiqui.
That'd be ISNA, right? Who last fall told a Washington crowd chanting pro-Hezbollah slogans, quote, America has to learn if you remain on the side of injustice, the wrath of God will come, end quote. Days later, after a conservative activist confronted Karl Rove with dossiers about some of Bush's new friends, Rove replied, according to the activist, quote, I wish I had known before the event took place, end quote. Do you know who that activist was?
No, because he's not named in that article, right? Okay.
I
haven't seen that particular article. Tons of stuff came out at that time. It was basically me, Frank Gaffney, Steve Emerson, Daniel Pipes, and a couple of other people on one side and the entire Muslim community on the other side. So we faced a tremendously uphill battle to try to get this changed. And ultimately, there was some movement, but it wasn't ultimately very successful. And so when I tell people,
okay,
you know, that this, yes.
I'm hearing all this for the first time. Okay, you and I haven't known each other that long, but I'm looking forward to a long friendship and having you with us this fall. But I'm hearing this with the audience tonight for the first time. This is fascinating. Have you written about this in a book, or will you be speaking about some of these kind of things at our fall conference? It can help us get an understanding. I mean, because this, I'm just telling you right now, this is fascinating. This is the kind of thing, this is the kind of information and history, inside ball game, right? Stuff that our audience wants to know. Have you written this in a book? Will you speak on these kind of things this fall for us?
No, because, well, see, I absolutely can speak about it in the fall. See, so when I looked up the event in Hamtramck, so the Trump rally and the meeting that happened in May in Troy, so these are all within a matter of months before the election, I looked up Bullis because he was my biggest issue, and I was trying to figure out his family alliance. So that's the one that's the father-in-law to Tiffany. He comes from a Christian Lebanese family, but the Christians in Lebanon are usually aligned to the Hezbollah party because they have a confessional government. The president is always Christian, so they're always building alliances, and they are historically connected to Hezbollah. And apparently his father was, and they were very active in Lebanese politics. So I thought to myself, well, okay, this is somewhat alarming. And then when I looked at the guest list, I saw the same cast of characters from 25 years ago. And I contacted a number of my people that I know are active in the administration. And I said, do you guys know that these are the same cast of characters? And I didn't get much of a response other than, we will pass this along to the right people.
The article goes on to say, if the administration was caught unaware back in 2001, the George W. Bush administration, it may be because they placed their trust in one of the right's most influential activists, Grover Norquist. As the president of Americans for Tax Reform, Norquist is best known for his tireless crusades against big government. But one of Norquist's lesser-known projects over the last few years has been bringing American Muslims into the Republican Party. And as he usually does, Norquist has succeeded. According to several sources, Norquist helped orchestrate various post-September 11th events that brought together Muslim leaders and administration officials. Quote, he worked with Muslim leaders to engineer Bush's prominent visit to the mosque, end quote, says the Arab-American pollster John Zogby to the president's September 7th trip to the Islamic Center of Washington, says Zogby, who counts Norquist among his clients. Quote, he's central to the White House outreach, end quote. Wowee. So you mentioned
if you really want to have fun one day, you need to look up the fight between Frank Gaffney and Grover. I think it was at CPAC one year, but apparently they had a screaming match. So if you Google public fight Frank Gaffney and Grover Norquist, they had it out about this because Frank's Center for Security Policy was next door to the Islamic Institute. And so there are a number of articles that were written about these fights between them because Frank physically saw these people going into that office and then was complaining to Grover about it. And then eventually there was a public falling out between them. And people are not sure. So people
look at that.
Grover was
You've already mentioned. You already mentioned this guy, David Frum. Didn't you just mention him as a former Bush speechwriter?
Yes, he was a speechwriter.
He wrote the article.
Oh, did he? Is he the one that wrote it?
Yeah, David Frum wrote it. February 17th, 2011. David Frum, The Secret History of Gaffney-Norquist Feud. That's at the Center for Security Policy right there.
Nice. Yeah, so I had a meeting with David while he was still in the White House trying to explain this whole thing. And he had heard it from Frank, and he just wanted to hear my perspective as a Muslim and a community member. And so he was a great ally. I think he did try his best.
Well, this brings us to Richard Grenell. So you're saying you were dealing with Richard Grenell 25 years ago, and now Richard Grenell's in the White House or around the president in key positions. Sorry,
not
he would be.
Grenell. No, I was not dealing with Richard Grenell. Khalid Safori, who was one of the members at the event. Khalid Safori, not Richard Grenell. I actually don't know how Richard Grenell gets in here. I didn't get to do a deep dive on that. I don't understand how he resurfaced, but the Arab Americans that were invited by Bullis and Bahba, the Palestinian interlocutor who you had the article about, and Grenell organized the meeting. So I recognize the names of the Arab Americans, not Richard Grenell.
Okay, great. Glad you clarified that. Okay, so how is this happening? Because when we were at the White House, I shook his hand and introduced myself and had a very, very brief conversation with Gorka, who I know you know and have worked with for a few decades, I think. I mean, he must be pulling his hair out, right?
I don't know. I don't want to keep pinging him with this crazy stuff. I know he knows it. So I don't want to be one of those annoying people that is like, do you know what's happening? Because I know he knows. And I know he knows what a problem it is. But again, this is this is diplomacy. I mean, the president went and met with Ahmed Ashara, the former head of ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra that's killed thousands of Americans. So there is a active negotiation for Trump to pursue peace, and he thinks these are legitimate actors. And I guess when you're trying to make peace with your enemies, you talk to your enemies. I think that's the way this theory goes. I don't think anyone's delusional about who they're dealing with. I think these people's history is quite clear. If I'm able to do it with open source intelligence, obviously people with, TSSCI clearances are able to find the same information, if not more. So I don't think they're doing it naively. Under President Bush, I believe it was naive. But now I think they are in active negotiations with Hamas and therefore want to speak with legitimate Hamas interlocutors.
So do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? And if you do disagree with it, how would you, with all your years of background and knowledge and coming out of Islam, how would you do it differently?
I don't agree with it, and then I don't have a suggestion for how you do it better, except that you can't ever believe that these people are honest brokers. And again, we just have to look at the history of Hamas ruling that territory in Gaza since 2015. We didn't get peace. We didn't get economic prosperity. We got tunnels and rockets. So I just don't understand how we think we can sit across the table from them and think we're going to get honest solutions to a problem. I don't believe they want a solution to the problem. So what do we do as the U.S. government, and especially a president that is really focused on his legacy being peace in the Middle East? I think that puts us in a quagmire. I don't know how you solve that problem when you're so actively pursuing peace and you don't have an honest broker at the other side of the table. How do you achieve it? I can guarantee you that the Israelis and Israeli intelligence know these are not honest brokers and are probably disgusted with being back here again with the U.S. government using these kinds of people as interlocutors. But I don't know what's a better way other than freezing them out and imposing sanctions and trying to crush it.
Is this maybe why there seems to be, I don't know if there is, but there appears to be a little tension between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and we all saw the video of Netanyahu walking out of the executive office doors to get into his SUV, and President Trump walks him out, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is carrying a book. And it was reported later that he was carrying the book by President Trump, The Art of the Deal. So based on everything you're saying to me now, I'm wondering, was there a rather frank conversation between President Trump and Netanyahu about these kind of people and negotiating with him? And President Trump's like, look, you need to read my book, Art of the Deal, because this is what I'm doing here. I mean, I'm just speculating, but clearly there's you're laughing. So, I mean, I'm thinking, can you imagine the conversation they had when they finally got in person, and what would precipitate him handing his book, Art of the Deal? Basically, this is what I'm doing. Now go read it. We'll talk later. I don't know.
I, in my gut, do not believe there is a deal that we win if we're cutting deals, because I just think it furthers the jihadi agenda here in the United States and around the world. I think every time we compromise, and I think Israel's right, I'm sorry to say, but they are right. You cannot compromise with people who want you to die. I don't see what the compromise is.
All right, take a look at this, Hadia. I covered this on radio today. Florida Congressman Randy Fine says what no one in Washington dares. Violent Islam is the norm. Peaceful Islam is the exception. Violent Islam, he says, not the exception. Peaceful Islam is the exception. We've gotten it entirely wrong. He went on to say there is a fundamentally broken culture that is fundamentally built on evil. Sometimes you must defeat evil. And we as a society have been unwilling to do that. In fact, we have coddled it. He goes on to say the Civil Rights Organization for Muslims in the United States is CARE. It is unquestionably a terrorist organization, a terrorist front. the leader of CARE, stood up after October 7th and talked about how happy it made him, and he still has a job. It's not an extremist element. Violent Islam is mainstream. In the United States, the nexus of Muslim terror is in our universities. We paid for him, the Washington, D.C. terrorist, to be brainwashed, and we've got to stop it. And he goes on to basically say that we don't have enough people in Washington speaking truth about Islam. We're coddling it. What do you make of this Jewish brand new congressman? I met him briefly when we were on Capitol Hill, told him we wanted to get him on the program. He said, absolutely, call my office. Let's set it up. So we got to do that. But what do you make of his comments?
I'd like to add a nuance. I think, so I used to tell people back in the early 2000s, we are radicalizing the middle. In other words, as the Western nations continue to coddle radical or violent Islam, it ends up radicalizing the middle or the moderates because they see them as the ones in power. So I think we've seen a very dangerous rise in radical Islamism. So I don't think the violent ones are the majority, but the radicalized ones are a majority. And what is the problem with that is they provide the institutional support, financial support, moral support. They're the ones that'll take to the streets. They're the ones that'll go to the ballot boxes and elect the candidates they want. And so there's a rising support for this more radical narrative. And as a result, the progressive Muslims or the secular Muslims are drowned out by these groups. And the more every successive administration empowers these people, the more defeated the moderates and the pluralists and the secularists feel. And I know I felt this 30 years ago, that we were a minority and we were constantly being outplayed, out fundraised, outgunned by these groups. And as a consequence, our voice got smaller and smaller. And that trend is just continuing. And then what happens to our system as a consequence?
This is fascinating what you just said. I want to just hammer that out a little bit more because I hope our audience understood and grasped the amazing analysis there. As you give as she described it, the radical Islamist more and more attention, more and more of a seat at the table, more and more prominence at the highest levels of our government in Washington, D.C., the more it demoralizes the moderate Muslims, but the more it attracts the moderate Muslim to join the radical Islamist because they see it's working for them. Apparently, this is how you get ahead. You get a seat at the table. So it's discouraging them, but at the same time, it's drawing them in, the moderates, to join the radical Islamists. Is that what you just said?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Wow. So at the end of the day, we're building their coalition for them. We're helping to make their radical, if you will, Islamic coalition bigger. I mean, I know there's only one Islam, right? There's only one Islam. So I know my audience will get mad at me for saying radical Islam versus, moderate Islam versus Islam. But I do know there are Muslims that are not, they're pork-eating, beer-drinking Muslims, like my friend Sharam Hadian's daddy was, His mom was Muslim. He loved his mother. He said she would have been a great neighbor to you. She wouldn't have bothered you one bit. They didn't really practice. They were Muslim by heritage. I mean, his daddy's the one that took the family out of Iran 6 weeks before the fall of the Shah, because he's like, I'm not living under this. I'm not living under Sharia. So I know there's only one Islam, but there are Muslims that don't want to really practice, just like you have Catholics that don't want to practice. You have Southern Baptists that don't really want to practice, but anyway, show up at Easter and Christmas or whatever. So I understand that. I want to make sure the audience understands what I'm saying. But what you're saying is those who want to actually follow the Quran, follow the Hadiths, the ones that are really doing this, Sharia, the ones who are more Americanized, if you will, they have mainstreamed, they have assimilated, they're now realizing, what has that gotten me? The ones that are getting the access and the power and the money and the organizations and the fundraising are the ones that are not mainstreaming. So we are helping to build their Islamic power base by catering to them and thus drawing in the ones that were trying to assimilate and be Americans.
Very good. That's exactly what I was trying to say. It pays to be a radical. It pays to be counterculture. It pays to be a squeaky wheel. It encourages people to want to protest. I tell people all the time, you would not have ever seen a bunch of Muslim Arab kids on college campuses rioting 10 years ago. They just didn't feel emboldened to do that. They were afraid. They thought they would be persecuted. And now, also with the help of the radical left, they're also being emboldened. So both on the right and the left, the radical Muslim groups have a seat at the table. So why would the majority? And I want to put a little nuance on this whole thing about there being one Islam. And the reason I make these distinctions is because there is a segment of the Muslim population that either does not practice, so kind of like Jewish people where they just are secular, some don't even believe in God, they identify with being Muslim by culture. So there's a whole segment of those people, but there's also a segment of people who try to follow Islam but are trying to reform it. In other words, they take the Quran and they say, this is a guidebook. It's not supposed to be literal. And so they put verses in historical context, anything that's violent, anything that says, you can't befriend the Jews and the Christians, and they say that was for, pre-civilized Arabia. That's not something we're going to do today. So they're constantly trying to reform their religion, but they're entirely drowned out by this group of jihadis that are sponsored by overseas governments to build a network in the United States to change our way of life. So how do they gain momentum for that effort? They don't.
Okay, so in closing, Hadiya, what do you see coming then? What do you see, if you had to guess, in 4 years, President Trump, steps off the world stage, what has he accomplished with the Abraham Accords, the Middle East, or is it just more of the same, another president who tried and nothing happened? I guess I keep waiting on an Antichrist figure to come up on the scene. I'm not looking for the Antichrist. I'm looking for Christ to return. But the Bible tells me there's going to be a figure that comes, and he has to rip out 3 of these groups by the roots. These 3 of these nation groups, he has to rip them out by the roots. So to get his 10 nation federation, 10 horns or 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who will, and then get for 1 hour and give their power to the beast. So for a little time, they get their power and they give it to the beast. But he's going to have to rip out 3 of these groups by the roots to get what he wants. I think that's Daniel 7. So I'm thinking a lot of this is not going to come into being until the Antichrist gets here and he shows up with, the idea of him being a peacemaker. But you end up, of course, obviously with war. So I'm wondering how much of this will never be done until that figure shows up. What do you think?
I'm with you. I'm just wondering if the Antichrist is going to just pop up from around the corner, because if there is this movement towards peace, as Christians, that's what we believe comes next, is then the Antichrist figure appears. And, you've outlaid the specifics, but it's surreal to me. It's literally watching the Bible come to life. And you just want to pick up Daniel and Revelation, look and Ezekiel and be like, wait a minute, is this what I'm seeing? Because it's astonishing. It's astonishing. I don't know if it's all going to be for nothing, if it's all going to end up failing, because when the president goes and solicits multi-billion-dollar, total of trillions of dollars investment from Arab countries into the United States, including in our colleges, and yet cramps down and prevents student visas and basically wants to kick out all foreign students from Harvard, how do those two things coexist? I don't know how that relationship survives that kind of attention. So I'm just wondering, he's the man of the art of the deal. So maybe he knows what he's doing in these seemingly contradictory approaches. But to me, I'm not quite sure how this ends up, except that we continue to have Muslim city, Sharia-based enclaves. And if this one in Epic City doesn't stop, then how many more are going to pop up? And what are we really doing about helping, progressive, culturally Muslim people integrate into American society and assimilate and adopt our values and try to reform their religion so that it's not this eternal threat. I don't know how far we get with any of that.
What do you think to have the Abraham Accords actually happen? What do you think the Arab nations are going to require of Israel when it comes to a Palestinian state? Are they going to require that? Or are they going to do that in Egypt and set something up there? Or what country might they go to? Jordan? I mean, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to get to is, if the Abraham Accords being pushed by President Trump requires Israel to give up land, isn't that inviting God's judgment on America? And are there maybe some people who are aware of this in his administration who are saying, look, if you want to get the Abraham Accords, and some of the Arab nations are saying we got to have a place for these Palestinians, then let's do it over here. But let's not divide Israel. Is there any chance they could get what they wanted without dividing the land in Israel?
So my understanding is that the Abraham Accords, the premise of it is that they did not need to solve the Palestinian-Israeli problem in order to have normalized relations with the other Middle East countries. So I actually had understood it to be a workaround. But if Saudi and the other countries that have not yet signed decide, no, you're going to have to create a state, well, then one of them is going to have to cough up the land. As of now, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, all of the neighbors are like, no way, we're not taking the Palestinians. So I don't understand who is going to step up. I mean, I can't see at this point who's going to step up and be the one that takes in and creates a new Palestinian state. And that we don't divide up Israel. I think the president will end up in a lot of the articles I read about Bahba and Bolis. They're pushing for a two-state solution. So I'd be curious. I know there's a lot of people around him, including the Evangelical Advisory Council that he has, that would definitely advise against him dividing up Israel. But I think it's anyone's guess what ultimately is going to end up at the table. I don't think it's entirely clear right now.
I think Mike Huckabee would have something to say about all that too, for sure. Can you give me your website for our audience to follow you and support your organization?
Thank you. It's resurrectministry.com, and you can drop me a line, send me a comment. You'd like to partner with this ministry, that's the best place to find me.
Resurrectministry.com.
Yes.
Excellent. Hadia, as always, thank you for your time, your ministry, your insights, your wisdom. A fascinating conversation, Hadia. Looking forward to having you also back again soon and at the fall conference this fall.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Hadia checking in, folks. Check out her website, will you? And again, remember, she'll be with us this fall as a Thursday night banquet speaker, but then also part of Friday and Saturday, along with the other speakers. Full details and tickets at worldviewstore.com. Again, they're only $99. We greatly lowered the price of the ticket by like more than half because we were able to save a lot of money going to the Mid-South, pass the savings on to you. We only have seating for 350 people. The rest of you who join the vault will be able to live stream it. We'd love to have you there in person. You can actually visit with people like Hadia and Gordon Chang and Sidney Powell and the rest of them. There you go, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. We'll be right back after this break. July 6, 2005. This is Tom Harper. Man figures plankton stopped his rare cancer. We got more of a response from our viewers than anything else you and I have ever discussed.
Tom Harper, 20 years ago, he had mesothelioma, deadly lung cancer, was given weeks to live, and he just intuitively started to eat the phytoplankton out of his fish tanks because he fed the phytoplankton to his shellfish. He was a shellfish farmer. And when he went in for the surgery, the surgeon came out of the operating room and told his family, I have not ever seen anything like it. The cancer is benign, and Tom Harper lived for years. He retired in Hawaii. We're not making any claim.
Here he is in his own words.
Started on a daily routine of just taking a bit of paste, putting it in my mouth, and wash it down with a drink of water. Within about 10 to 15 days, here I am, less pain in my back. I knew that something was going on, so I just kept eating half a teaspoon of this paste a day. I was booked to go for surgery in Victoria where they were going to do what they call a talc treatment. They went in there to have a look, saw something they never seen before, took 11 sites, sent them away for biopsy. I got the news back. Everything was benign. They just did not know what to make of it. Everything was absolutely clean. And I've tried dieting all my life because I'm a diabetic. If it's a coincidence or not, I don't know. My blood sugar started dropping. My weight started falling off. Here I am, no longer requiring insulin, and I was taking 88 units a day of insulin. I eat just about what I want in moderation, and I have no elevated sugar levels, and I feel fabulous.
People, you hear the word cancer and they want you to be instilled with fear. Cancer is nothing but a profound failure of the immune system. And what happened with Tom Harper is the phytoplankton is microscopic. It's God's microscopic food. And the Gadatiana is the most nutritionally comprehensive strain phytoplankton in the world. David Hunter studied phytoplankton for 20 years because he worked for Tom Harper and he was there in person and witnessed Tom's recovery. It's about getting pure nutrition inside your cells. And what happens, your body balances again or goes back to homeostasis. And when your body is pH balanced or in homeostasis, disease can't grow. It is literally microscopic, pure single cell plant food with protein and omega-3 fatty acids, omega-6 fatty acids, with amino acids and vitamins and minerals. One scoop a day. There's 90 billion plant cells in here just for everyday nutrition and energy and, cognitive support, because this is God's pure nutrition.
Go to melissahousegpa.com today. Discover the science and learn more about the wonderful benefits of Gadatana phytoplankton. That's melissahousegpa.com. melissahousegpa.com.
Joining me now is Carl Teichrib. He's an expert on transhumanism, technocracy. Transhumanism, the idea that you're going to keep living. Think Rocket Man. What was the name of that program? The guy, he had the red suit on and the mask, and was it Johnny Depp that played that guy? Iron Man. Yeah, Iron Man. Think Iron Man. Think RoboCop. That's transhumanism. Robert Downey. That's right. Thank you, guys. That's transhumanism. Technocracy, that's using technology to control us. Just make sure everybody's up on the terms, because we're always adding new people here. Well, Carl Teichrib is an expert on this, and he is a Canadian. I want to talk about this article here. This is one article over at the website of my friend Pamela Geller. Canada, unsafe for Jews. Israel's National Security Council issues travel warning for Jews, Israelis in Canada. Let's talk about some of these issues today. Been a while since we visited with Carl Teichrib. Carl, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Brannon, it's good to be with you.
Great to have you with us. All right, you're in Canada. Let's talk about this. Why is it becoming so unsafe for Jews in your country?
Well, it's becoming unsafe for Jews across the Western world. I mean, just recently, you saw a shooting in Washington, D.C., taking the life of two Messianic Jewish people. This is not just a Canadian issue, it is a Western world issue. And Canada is, of course, like Europe, like America, we are seeing an influx of anti-Semitism and a pressure against the Jewish community. And so one of the things, Brannon, that sets Canada apart is demographically we have changed. At one point, there was a strong Jewish community in Canada. There still is. We have roughly 350,000 Jews in Canada. However, because of immigration changes, we have seen a large inflow of Muslim people from the Middle East. So today, right now, we have roughly 1.8 to 2 million Muslims in Canada, with a population of, in total, we have 40 million people. So roughly 2 million in a population of 40. You're seeing a shift at that point. And it's not surprising then that you're going to be seeing, and this is indeed the case, the Liberal government and other governments have sided more with the pro-Hamas, pro-PLO side versus the Jewish Israeli community. And there's a reason it gets votes. The Jewish community is much smaller compared to now the Islamic community. So that's part of it, Brannon. There's been a mind change, though, that goes beyond just simply demographics, it goes beyond just simply immigration. And that is we're seeing in my country, just like we're seeing in yours, our academic institutions becoming hotbeds for anti-Israeli sentiment. We are seeing a pushback in terms of even the Christian community coming on board to say, hey, we're supporting now the Palestinian side. In fact, I have a couple of documents from the Mennonite Central community, older documents, but material go back and basically, though they claim to be neutral, certainly have a tone that is against Israel's involvement and pro-Palestinian. So, I mean, you got all these things coming together. Besides the academic side, you see in Canada a lot of our unions, CUPE, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, being very anti-Semitic. And it comes from the leadership right through the resolutions, right through their talking points, so much so that it's pretty disturbing sometimes the level of rhetoric. And then, all right, you've got PLO and Hamas, pro-Palestinian rallies taking place in Toronto, Winnipeg, my capital city, and in other major urban zones. And the police, for the most part, I think, kind of feel like their hands are tied and more or less allowing this to continue on, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you about Carney, your new prime minister. You went from Trudeau, who was there for what, over a decade, to Carney.
Yeah.
I mean, Carney, he's just as dumb as a box of rocks, isn't he?
Dangerous, not dumb. There's a difference. Mark Carney has
No, I know there's a difference, but a lot of these guys just aren't real bright. I know there's a difference, but a lot of these guys just don't seem like they're real bright people. So that leads me to believe you combine stupidity with ideology, and then they become very dangerous, right? And the question is, who's pulling the strings? Because Carney, and neither was Trudeau, neither one of them are smart enough to be making these decisions. Who do these guys answer to in your country? I'm pretty sure it's the same people they answer to in our country, but you tell me.
Well, my goodness, when it comes to Carney, number one, people forget he was the governor of the Bank of Canada. He was the governor of the Bank of England. He sat on the Bank for International Settlements, their board. He is absolutely wrapped up and tied into the global banking community. He was the United Nations Special Envoy on Climate Change. So, yes, that is his environment. That's what he's walking into, or walking actually from, and now walking into the position of prime minister. He is a global banker. That's what he is.
Mm-hmm. And is he, since he has the environmental side to him, and the Bank for International Settlements for new people, because again, we're adding new people all the time. The Bank for International Settlements is the central bank of central bankers. So the Central Bank of Canada, the Central Bank of America, our Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of Industrialized Nations, of the westernized industrialized nations, belong to the Bank for International Settlements based out of Basel, Switzerland. Carol Quigley wrote the book back in 1966, Tragedy and Hope. He mentored Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton gave him a shout out at his Democratic acceptance speech in the early 90s and praised Carol Quigley. Well, Carol Quigley at Georgetown University, where he mentored Clinton, wrote this book in 66, Tragedy and Hope, where he spilled his guts, said, hey, look, I've seen all the secret writings. I've seen all the secret papers. I've attended the meetings of the globalists. They don't really want me telling you this, but here's the great news. We're headed toward world government. It's going to be awesome. And he spilled his guts. In fact, there was an article written about him in one of the Washington papers when the book came out called The Professor Who Knew Too Much. Ironically, he died from some kind of heart attack. I don't know about that, if that's really the case or that was the cover. But he said that the one world order, the new world order, would come through the Bank for International Settlements, banking, BIS. Carney worked with the central banks, you just said. He worked with the BIS. but he also worked on the United Nations Sustainable Development Climate Agenda stuff. So do you see your country and the other countries eventually moving increasingly toward carbon credits and some kind of digital currency tied back to carbon credits? Because that's a great scam. What a scam. You know, you got to offset your carbon credits, every family, investing into buying those carbon credits by buying into solar and wind and all these other shenanigans. I mean, what a scam. Is that what he's pushing on Canada?
So I assume that that's going to be happening because that has been his talking point for so long. But here's the thing, Brannon, we have already, as Canadians, we have already been paying carbon taxes. We have gone hip deep into those waters. Canada has led the way in terms of pushing for sustainable development, pushing for environmental global governance, and when it comes to things like carbon credits, carbon taxes, playing in the carbon market, Canada has led the way. And Carney has been a very big part of that. In fact, Carney was, you could call him almost the de facto man behind Justin Trudeau when it came to some of Canada's economic policies. One of the things, though, is that it's a dead end. It's economically destructive. And Canada, unfortunately, has, it's running itself into the ground financially and has been doing so for so long. It is my hope as a Canadian that if at some point the population of Canada, which is mostly urban concentrated, will all of a sudden wake up to the fact that they have been bamboozled, that they have been taken for a ride. And the cost of living in Canada is quite high. Some of that can be put on the shoulders of our very expensive carbon and net zero policies, including especially the destruction of our energy industry, which has been ongoing for years already as our Liberal government has been ideologically driven. But keep in mind, Canada, it sounds crazy. A lot of folks don't know this. A lot of Canadians don't even realize this. We're an urban country. We're the second largest landmass on the planet, but about 84% of Canadians live in our large urban zones. And there's only about 10 large urban areas, but that's where the concentration of our population is. And then, of course, being a parliamentary system, it's in essence a type of mob rule. And so if you could imagine America by 10 largest cities, you'd have a sense of where your nation would go to, unfortunately.
Let's talk about Canada becoming the 51st state. This keeps being talked about by President Trump. Is this something that you think will happen? Of course, you and I have been warning about the idea of a North American Union for a long time. I don't know what President Trump's trying to do here with this, but if I had to guess, I would say he's seeing it from a ledger standpoint. Let's take the natural resources of America, Canada, Greenland, Mexico, put them on a ledger, tokenize them, and offset our national debt, and your country can offset its debt, and we'll be so cotton picking rich, it won't matter that our country is $200 trillion in debt with off the book unfunded liabilities like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Is that what he's doing? Is this a financial play more than anything?
Oh, I definitely see this as a resource play, a resource/financial play. What seemed to be just a joke at first seems to have certainly some more serious implications. So what's interesting with this, though, Brannon, is then you have the creation of a de facto North American Union. Right now, the European Union is looking to integrate deeper. I was just a couple of days ago at the NATO forum in Dayton, Ohio, just this last weekend. And one of the things that came out from that conversation was that Europe feels the pressure from the Russian side, from Putin, but also feels the pressure from the American side. And so the answer for Europe is we need to tighten our union even more. We need to integrate deeper, and we need to extend membership into the Balkan areas and into other zones within the European circle. And so Europe is going to be, and this is where it seems to be going, Europe looks to become a more unified, deeper union. North America will look towards becoming some type of having some type of continental arrangement. That's been in the works for a very long time because Canada is a resource powerhouse. We just simply have, unfortunately, some very unwise people in Ottawa. And so you're seeing very similar moves happen in Latin America. ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, there's more talk of integrating. There's lots and lots of problems to all of these schemes, and many of the problems are just going to be hashed out in a very easy way. They may require some significant crisis to force these continental blocks to come together. This is about maybe 4 months ago or so, 5 months ago, I was at an academic conference on the United Nations, and one of the suggestions was turning the Security Council, turning it and changing it to become a Security Council of regions, not veto the 5 veto states, but instead have regional representation, which is a remarkable concept and very dangerous.
I wonder, Carl, of course, I'm following Bible prophecy. I think you do too. The 10 horns are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, meaning at the time John was writing, but will receive power along with the beast. And then they'll give their power to the Antichrist. 10 regions, 10 horns, 10 kings, 10 regions, North American Union, Central America, or South America, Europe, et cetera, Africa. They already have these 10 regions. The European Union's Commission's done it. The United Nations done it. The Club of Rome has done it. And I've told this audience many times, you go back to the writings of John Stormer, Phyllis Schlafly. They were warning that a bunch of George H. Bush, a bunch of those globalist rhino uniparty boys under and around George H. were pushing for a parliamentary system in America. They didn't like our system here in America. That was back in the early 90s. I'm wondering if the uniparty, the globalist, is now trying to move toward a parliamentary system, but based on 10 regions of the world. So a North American Union. And I don't know who's telling President Trump this, because he's warned about sustainable development, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, these kind of things. He's warned, he's warned about WHO, UNESCO. So I don't know if he fully understands what's at play here and who is pushing him to do this. And he's just seeing it from a national security and probably mostly from an economic standpoint. But I wonder if that's where we're headed as a North American Union, to be up above the United States, because that's what Carol Quigley said. Carol Quigley said it's going to create a system that's above the United States government and the governments of these other countries. And it makes me wonder, Carl, people talk about President Trump 2028. I wonder if that's all, and I'm just guessing. I wonder, because there's usually a reason for why Trump and his people do what they say. I wonder if Trump 2028 is just getting people, to start thinking beyond his presidency and second term. But I wouldn't be shocked. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I would not be shocked if we saw a North American Union and the guy who put it all together becomes the first president of the North American Union. Well, President Trump becomes the first president of the North American Union if he puts it all together. I just wouldn't be shocked. And I wouldn't say that if they weren't pushing for this Trump 2028 thing, that I'm thinking they don't really think they're going to get around the Constitution on that, are they? So what is the real game here? Maybe this is just setting people up to get ready for him to do something beyond the presidency, president of the North American Union. I'm just guessing. What say you?
That's an interesting guess, Brannon. And, time will tell. We definitely are seeing, though, a sense of integration that's happening. Recently I have a Substack called Convergence, and I did a report. It's a multi-part series on regionalism. The first part came out a few weeks back. People can go back and take a look at it. And I pulled up an early set of documents from the 1940s that broke down the world into 11 regions, and other examples from the 1940s breaking it down into 10 regions. This concept has been kicking around in globalist circles for a long time. But if we all of a sudden, let's say, have an economic shock, and I mean a real shock of magnitude, a massive shock that impacts the bond market, impacts the US dollar as the reserve currency, the global reserve currency, all of a sudden I could see the economic model coming into play to bring Canada, the US, and Mexico together, forcing us into that.
Yep. So let me ask you, where do you think the technocrats, the transhumanists, where are they at? What's their next move? You go to the UN conferences, you go to these conferences. What's the next play? Is it moving toward regional currencies, cryptocurrencies regionally? Is it just bypassing all of it and going to a global currency right away? Is it using another plandemic of some kind? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. today canceled the $700 million contract, I think it was with Moderna, for the bird flu because it's not proven safe and effective. So is it a plan for another plandemic, or are they going to bypass that? Is it going to be massive terrorist attack, economic collapse, or maybe some of these things combined together? Are you getting any sense from these events what they're telegraphing? Because the globalists like to telegraph, don't they?
Yeah, so a couple of things come into play. Number one, so much talk about artificial intelligence, okay? Massive conversations around AI and what AI potentially could do to disrupt, and how AI can be integrated into things like national security. AI is absolutely a powerhouse, but with AI comes massive, massive energy consumption, tremendous energy consumption. And then that raises the question, where are we going to get the energy from? So, I mean, North America is an energy powerhouse, and it fits with the narrative then to bring more energy on board with a North American power grid, which already basically exists and has existed for a long time, to build up data centers as opposed to China doing it. The other conversation that's a great, very big right now, of course, is China, it's Russia. One of the things that is talked about a little bit, and I heard it quite a bit this last weekend at the NATO forum in Dayton, was the role of the Balkans as a player that bridges Western Europe into the Eastern world, and the importance of this zone when it comes to intelligence, the propaganda war with Russia. So if all of a sudden we see things accelerate from that military point of view, we could potentially see ourselves in a crisis situation. And that's what it's going to be. In fact, that's what you've just been hinting at. Like, what is it? What will be that trigger point that forces these amalgamations? Is it going to be a war? Is it going to be the challenge of artificial intelligence at a global scale? What is it? Is it going to be an economic collapse? Because we are seeing some really crazy indicators when it comes to how destabilizing the global economy is. All of these things are being discussed at some level, and I've heard some of these conversations myself. In fact, I just heard them again this weekend. So there is this sense of urgency that we need to have, and I heard it at the NATO forum, we need to have the European Union integrate tighter. There needs to be a deeper involvement between the EU and America. There's quite a bit of talk of the importance of America within the European model. One of the speakers was very adamant, and I remember he's a U.S. colonel. He was very adamant in saying, America cannot go alone. Everybody is in this game together. And that's kind of where we've gone, hasn't it, Brannon? It's like, okay, if one part of the world sneezes, the whole world can catch a cold.
Now, tell us again the name of the conference in Dayton, Ohio you were at. What was it called?
That was the NATO forum. So NATO hosts a parliament every few months in different parts of the world. There's one coming up in The Hague in the later part of June. But the spring NATO parliament took place in Dayton, Ohio. And so Dayton, Ohio was the downtown area was all cordoned off with security and helicopters and a strong police presence. You couldn't go in and out without certain credentials, but they also hosted a dialogue forum, bringing in some heads of state, a lot of ambassadors and diplomats, people involved in the intelligence community, members of parliament, members of Congress, senators, and allow the public to interact with them on an informal level. And so that was the event that I was attending for 4 days.
And who sponsored
as
that?
a parallel to the parliament? NATO.
Who was the
NATO
actual sponsor?
NATO and
NATO. Okay, that's what I'm getting at. Yep, that's what I'm getting at. Because we were just at the, I don't know if you had a chance to go there. We were just at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. Were you there?
Oh, okay. No, I wasn't. I'd like to go, though.
Oh, you should. 4 hangars full of airplanes. We got a ton of footage. We'll be producing that into stuff and releasing it to the public here on our network. They were going to be closed for a few days. And I said to one of the tour guides there, what's going on? She said, oh, NATO. We're going to have a bunch of big muckety-mucks, NATO, world leaders. So I knew that was going to go there. All right, so let me ask you this in closing here. A couple quick questions. Do you think we're headed to World War III? And what is the play here by Europe, by NATO? Germany, Mertz, you're going to give them billions in weaponry. We're going to let them shoot deep into Russia. I mean, this seems like a suicide mission when you're fooling around with a powerful country like Russia that has, you know, supersonic Satan II missiles that can skip on the atmosphere, can go stealth, carry multiple warheads. What on earth are they thinking in NATO? What are they doing? And is this about regime change? Were you hearing anything about we got to get rid of Putin because he's not going to go along with the New World Order or the idea of a North American Union, a European Union? You know, we gotta get these unions going, and there's no way Putin's going to go along with green energy, alternative energy, all the things we want to do. We got to get rid of Putin. Is that what this is about? Regime change for the New World Order, if you will? Kind of the way I think George H. Bush tried to redo the Middle East for what he talked about his New World Order from the Oval Office and from the podium in the Capitol in the House. Remember both of those speeches, New World Order, Mr. George H. So what are you hearing on the ground when you were there? What is NATO trying to do when it comes to Putin?
Okay, so that I heard regarding regime. This was the flavor of the conversation. NATO and Russia obviously are at odds, and they view Russia as being a regional player having great pressure against Europe and potentially disrupting NATO and the EU process, especially if they can get involved deeper in the Balkans or in the Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. But the conversation was way more than just Russia. There was an acknowledgement, repeated acknowledgement of the role of China. And so the conversation is that NATO no longer can just be about North American, European security, but has to now look at Indo-Pacific issues as well. And so with their partnership program, they would like to expand their footprint into the Indo-Pacific region. And they recognize that China is the global disruptor, whereas Russia is the regional disruptor. So that was the sense of the conversation as it unfolded. And then it became very, there was a lot of nitty-gritty conversation around the processes of rearming Europe, including the Berlin process, which is going to bring in a tremendous amount of money to try to bring about infrastructure integration, making sure that the Baltic regions or the Balkans are integrated with a high-speed rail, with energy pipelines, and more or less make sure that Europe is fused with energy and infrastructure along with the rebuilding of its own military capabilities. And this is viewed as a pushback or a way of holding off Russia. My concern is the same as your concern, Brannon. Is this potentially taking us into a much harder conflict with Russia? And if it does, then you're going to see other parts of the world, including the Indo-Pacific region, becoming very destabilized as China will begin to make moves as well.
Is their goal to get rid of Putin?
They never said that. I never heard them say we're going to get rid of Putin. All they were, but obviously they would like to see some form of regime change. That obviously is in the cards. It has to be, as they recognize that Putin is the one who leads this charge towards disruption in the European zone. So we're seeing some big chess moves taking place right now. And this is going to be a very interesting year as things continue to unfold. And
what about Donald Trump? What were they saying about Donald Trump?
Well, conversations of tariffs came in, and we had the defense contractors going, hey, we're having a really tough time. As American defense contractors, we're having a very difficult time with our contracts because tariffs all of a sudden are gone, and then tariffs return, and tariffs come back, and tariffs are gone. And we can't even write our contracts. We can't get our supply chains in order, and we're going to see we're going to see potential job losses in America, and the inability for certain defense sectors to get their own house in order, simply because of the destruction of supply chains. So let's talk about that. And then the other thing that came up repeatedly was that the American administration is absolutely a partner within the European Union program. And this came out repeatedly, Brannon, that that the European Union concept and the idea of European integration and a tighter continental arrangement is an American strategic interest. This is an American project. So there was a
so in other words, they believe
that
the Trump administration, they were signaling, is on their side with this closer alignment between a European Union and maybe a North American Union. They weren't saying the Trump administration is hostile. They're saying they were a partner.
Absolutely, including the ambassadors that were there. We had U.S. diplomats who were in attendance, including the NATO ambassador from the United States, and they all recognize that we are working with the European Union to create a stronger EU. No question.
Which, of course, in closing brings up the question, is President Trump aware of what he's doing? Is he being handled? Does he know what's happening here? Or does he feel as president, look, the ship of state is sinking, we're in big trouble, and I've been dealt these cards, and I can only see us getting out of this by backing up our fiat currency with hard assets, which includes land and minerals. So I'm sorry, I'm going to go for a North American Union to back up my currency and keep us from collapsing as a nation. Sorry, guys, I got to do this. Because I wonder if that's what's happening. Because Phyllis Schlafly, remember Phyllis Schlafly was one of the first people to come out in favor of him running for president. Yet she was a massive opponent to a North American Union, right? She's the one that taught me and so many others about this. Does President Trump realize this? And if he does, is he doing it out of pragmatism or survival? Realizing I can't think of any other way to balance the books and keep us afloat from collapsing as a nation, and they're not going to do that on my watch. I'm not going to take the blame for this. Is he basically going into pragmatism, survival mode, and legacy mode here, or what?
I think for the most part, it's a sense of pragmatism. Okay, one of the things that comes across when you go to events like this is the complexity of our world. The incredible integration that has already happened can't be undone easily, period. All the talk we can of saying, hey, America will go alone or whatever. Sorry. One of the conversations that arose was, look, China produces magnets for electric motors. We don't have anybody in the Western world that really produces magnets of any quantity anymore. We are so tightly integrated. And so it's one thing to say to the public, to say to your constituents, hey, this is what we're going to do as a nation, whether it's your country or my country. Connie's been saying, it's stupid, saying elbows up against Trump. Oh, how ridiculous. our economies are integrated. There is tremendous complexity in the world. And so you see politicians saying one thing and then doing something very different, because the pragmatic side of it is there already is these levels of complexity that you can't undo. And if you do undo them, if you do unravel them, well, that's a massive gamble. I think part of what we're seeing with Trump is he has been willing to bet on it, to gamble to some extent. But at the same time, he's had to walk back from some of it because there is a cost, and the cost may be too severe at the moment.
So at the end of the day, you're a Christian, I'm a Christian. You follow Bible prophecy, I follow Bible prophecy. I think the stage is being set for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled. And I think a lot of folks in the MAGA world don't get it. They don't understand it. I hope they would. I wish they would. We're trying to help them to. A lot of them don't get it. They don't realize what's happening. And they may be shocked when they get past this second term of President Trump and look back and realize, whoa, God let him get in there to set the stage for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled. Some of which the policies, they're not really going to be America first. They're going to be a North American Union first. Closing comment?
Yeah, as a Christian, I look at all this and I'm going, I want to see godly wisdom exhibited by our leaders, by your leadership, by my leadership. At the same time, we see that there's a fallibility. Man is fallible. Ideas and schemes that have been put in place, sometimes decades ago, are still in motion. And at the end of the day, I have to trust Jesus Christ to be my King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I'm not my political system. And that's honestly, for us as Christians, that's where our focus should be.
I 100% agree. Give your website, Carl.
Yeah, you can go to forcingchange.org. It's a repository of my older articles and some of my older material. You can go to gameofgods.ca to grab a copy of my book, Game of Gods, a great big text on globalization. And I started a recent Substack, and I've got articles and reports going up on that. So look up on the Substack, Convergence, Power and Belief, and be sure to go and check out the report, the first part, the multi-part series on regionalism, including some very interesting documents from the 1940s demonstrating how the world is being cut up into regions.
Absolutely. Carl, as always, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. You bet, Brannon.
Guys, great interview. Fascinating. Forcingchange.org. We'll be right back right after this break.
Better science leads to better outcomes. So by understanding the science in much more intimate detail, delivering a value product that is so different from anybody else.
So when we're stepping outside into seasonal changes, low humidity, sunlight, pollution, all of these things get communicated as stress on the top layer of skin that produces free radicals, and they're bad news for collagen networks. They're going to break down the collagen network and collapse that beautiful tensile strength of your skin. And so that's how we end up with fine lines and wrinkles. Bella Grace is really an elevated formula.
Better than the competition for very obvious reasons. First of all, we're delivering great collagen. We're delivering Verisol, which is the world's most studied form of collagen. So we're starting at a foundation that's really top notch.
So here is a lady today. She's taken the elixir, arthritis in her hands. She could not close her hands and make a fist, but after now being on the elixir, now she can.
The real breakthrough discovery, particularly with the cat's claw, it's a switch that regulates genes. There's thousands of genes that are involved in that inflammation process. When you have chronic inflammation, the problem is the switch is on and it's not being turned off. And so what's happening with the cat's claw is that it removes that little protein switch off your DNA, and the genes go back to a dormant state and you go back to being, well, really healthy.
When at first we wanted to just have an amazing collagen ingestible product to be able to set the skin up. so that my wife, Christina, could come behind that with incredible skincare. And that's exactly what we're still doing. What we weren't anticipating was the magnitude and just the vast amount of benefits that this elixir was going to do for people. Testimonies started flooding back in. About probably 30% of the testimonies were about hair, skin, and nails. The others were about people being able to walk up their stairs again, people being able to open their hands in the morning without having to do heat therapy, people being able to sleep better, athletes before and after recovery, and the energy levels that people were having. So we realized that this is so much more than just a collagen ingestible product, which it certainly is that at the highest of levels. We've even had so many people in the health and wellness world say this is legitimately, Brian, the number one, the best health and wellness product that's ever been introduced. And I would say probably the only negative here with Bella Grace and this elixir is that it sounds too good to be true, but it really is true.
Bella Grace Elixir, a scientific breakthrough with over 80 clinical trials. Visit melissahousebg.com to discover Bella Grace Elixir and the full range of Bella Grace products.
All right, joining me now is Dr. Bashima Williams. We're going to talk about RFK Jr. canceling about a $700 million contract over the bird flu, which isn't safe. How refreshing is it to have an HHS secretary that actually cares about the health of Americans? It's very refreshing. Make America healthy again, right? Well, that's certainly what we're trying to do. How about, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what happens when you're overweight. And then let's talk about a couple of viewers have sent in some questions. And then I think since our last visit last week, Dr. Bashima Williams has actually gone out and watched again The Firm, which was shot right here in Memphis, as I recommend that she do, and she did. We got a lot to talk about with Dr. Bashima. Dr. Bashima Williams, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me again, Brannon. Always a pleasure as usual. And you never know where this conversation is going to, yeah. And you never know where this conversation is going to go with you at the head.
No, this is true. And which on that note, we were talking the other day. I think we're going to make a trip sometime after the middle of August. We'll make a trip. We'll endeavor to make a trip up to St. Louis. And your husband, the MD, you're an MD too, but your husband, I guess, is the one you're going to put me with, and he's going to listen to my heart, and he's going to dispel the myth that I'm the only surviving heart donor around, that I actually have a heart, and which, you know, I think I do, but he'll verify that I have one. And kind of like the Grinch, you know, it's getting bigger. I love the Grinch, by the way. So don't get me started on lines from the Grinch with Jim Carrey. I know all the lines. Let's see. And he's going to take my blood pressure. I'm actually going to get a somewhat of a checkup, guys, for the first time in a gazillion years. No, we're not doing anything. No prostate exam. Sorry. Still, that's a hard no. And I guess you're going to take some blood work. And then you're going to send it off and do whatever all that stuff it is you guys do. And then we're going to come back. I guess I need to sign some paperwork. And you're going to read my blood sample and report on the air. What do you think of that? That's like Evel Knievel, right on the edge of stuff, right?
We can certainly do that, but also just as a something to think about, we could actually order your labs after you officially just fill out some paper, some history, medical history, that kind of thing. We can actually order your labs before you come to the office. That way we have the results and we can review them with you first in private.
Well, how are you going to get my blood?
So that would be at any Quest or LabCorp. We can order labs anywhere in the country. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then when we come there, we could actually set up our camera and film, and we can go over my lab work for the whole audience to find out.
That's right. I would recommend that you find out first, just in case. I don't know if you read the longevity show that Disney had, which I thought was really interesting. And there is a famous actor, Chris Hemsworth, who found out that he has the gene that increases his risk for dementia. And his physician, Dr. Peter Attia, did not want to share that with him in front of the whole world without sharing it with him privately first. So we do like to share privately first, just full disclosure, and then you can share what you want to share.
All right, that's fine. We can do that. But if I had a tendency toward dementia, I'd still tell my audience, because I think I have a product that helps with that. It's called Numi with glutathione to detox my, take metal out of your brain, mercury out of your brain, I should say, and help prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. So, I don't know what we're going to find out, but I'll tell the audience. I mean, what are you going to do? It is what it is, right? Right.
And Chris Hemsworth also told the audience with the idea that you can do so many lifestyle things right now that can, even if you're a high risk person, significantly delay the onset, if not prevent it altogether. So even though you might have a 70% increased risk, what you do today, and that was the value of it, right? The value of knowing this information is so that you can act on it, not just so that you can live in fear of, oh my gosh, when am I going to get this? So what we have to realize and understand is that you can't change your genes. You are born with whatever you're born with, but you can change the way those genes express themselves. That is called phenotypic expression. So you can definitely alter your genes in a sense of how they work, not what they are. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So you just need to tell me where here in the Mid-South I need to go, get my blood work taken, and we'll get cracking on that.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's go to this here. This is CNBC. Listen to what they reported yesterday. Here we go.
The administration has canceled a contract with Moderna for the development of a bird flu vaccine for humans. Our Angelica Peebles joins us now with more, and you could conjecture a lot of things about this between RFK Jr. and vaccines and mRNA. What's behind all this, Angela?
Yeah, good morning, Joe. So this is just the latest in a string of events that we've seen related to COVID vaccines over the last week. And what's happening here is that the Trump administration is canceling a more than $700 million contract with Moderna to develop a bird flu vaccine and other pre-pandemic influenza viruses. And so what's really notable about this is that obviously we've seen this, we've seen bird flu tearing through birds and also dairy cows and the risk to humans. And so what we saw in the Biden administration is that they really ramped up this work and they were helping to fund, they were going to fund a phase 3 trial to see if we could use mRNA for a bird flu vaccine if it indeed spills over to humans. And now the cancellation of this vaccine is quite a surprise. Maybe not a surprise now because we had been hearing rumblings about this for the past few months. But, we just saw this contract ramp up right before the last administration left. And now you have the Trump administration saying that they felt like after a rigorous review, we concluded that the continued investment in Moderna's H5N1 mRNA vaccine was not scientifically or ethically justifiable. And they're saying that it's not just about efficacy, it's about safety. And so it's interesting to hear them really casting doubt on just the safety and the efficacy of mRNA vaccines as a whole.
Well, there you go. And that's a good thing, Doctor. That's a very good thing to see almost $700 million canceled on the bird flu vaccine. Apparently, HHS Secretary Kennedy doesn't think it's safe. It hasn't been proven to be safe, right?
The long-term studies on safety are unknown right now. We are literally in a mix of a science experiment, similar to EMF and all the effects of EMF that we know is having at the cellular level and increasing oxidative stress. Another good reason to take that glutathione, because glutathione is your body's number one antioxidant. So if you are in the middle of a science experiment, then 5, 10, 15 years down the line, we have no idea what will happen to our bodies, our children that we're injecting these vaccines with. We don't know. Long-term studies are unknown right now because these vaccines, and especially the mRNA technology, was put out so quickly. And to be honest, Brandon, if I go back to 2001 when I read the book, What Your Doctor Is Not Telling You About Vaccines, even back then, there's a certain amount of side effects that the vaccine company expects, and the government protects them against having major lawsuits. And even in families where one child has been given a vaccine and has had a really severe bad reaction, the next child who is up for that vaccine still is required to get that vaccine according to, schools and even colleges. I had a pre-med student who later became an amazing orthopedic surgeon, by the way, whose brother had a severe reaction to the DTaP vaccine, which caused such a severe fever that the child ended up getting encephalitis and became mentally disabled. Now, when it was his brother, who's the orthopedic surgeon, his turn to get the vaccine, his mom did not want it, but waivers were really difficult to get through in medical school. And we did not want that same reaction potentially to happen to his brother. And so these types of things, these are unknowns. And the thing is these drug companies are protected by the government. So if we have side effects, then we cannot sue them.
Take a look at this. The McCullough Foundation put this out. Twin babies die a week after receiving 3 vaccines. Police interrogate the parents. Well, of course they did. Of course they did. Look, I tend to be, I used to be pro-police. I'm not sure how I put it anymore, because I don't want to say I'm pro-police, because that makes it sound like I am biased and always in the camp of the police. So I'm not anyone that's pro-police anymore. That's a bad way. I am a realist, okay? I am pro-truth, okay? I'm pro-truth. But I'm not shocked because your police are not taught about SIDS, why we have sudden infant death syndrome. They aren't taught about Islam. They aren't taught about what really goes on in the mosque. They aren't taught about most of what happens that they're going to deal with. They learn on the fly at best. I was talking to a medical student the other day. He's got 1 year. And he'll be called a doctor, studying to be an OBGYN. I've known him since he was a teenager. And he is so pro-vax. And I said, really? I said, so what vaccines are you for little babies? Oh, well, I think when they should definitely have the measles, mumps, rubella. And I said, oh, really? Have you done any studies related to that? And autism? Oh, that's all just conspiracy. I said, really? And how much homework have you done on this versus just you're being brainwashed in medical school? I said, what else do you think they should get? I guess you probably think they should get the hepatitis B shot. Oh, yeah, definitely. I said, how long does that hepatitis B shot last there, doctor? He says, and I was being quite smart with him because I've known him since he was a teenager. And he really thinks he's smart. I mean, he really thinks he's brilliant. And he may be, but he's a typical probably kid in medical school 1 year, because he's like, in 1 year you can call me doctor. I'm like, I think I'll still call you by your first name. But anyway, I said, how long does that hepatitis B shot last? Oh, a long time. I said, really? What, isn't it like 7 years? So you're planning sometime between day 1 and 7, that child's going to be a drug user with dirty needles and risky sex? He looked at me like, what? I'm like, yeah, why don't you go do your homework on these shots? He was buying the propaganda. So, of course, the cops are told things. So when they find 2 twins dead, a set of twins dead, they start interrogating the police. But here we go. On May 1st, Dallas and Thiessen, fraternal 18-month-old twins, were found dead by their mother after receiving the hepatitis A, flu, and diphtheria vaccines. Well, there you go. She told the pediatrician, if I remember reading this article, she was already leery, that they had a history of allergic reactions to the flu vaccine, but the pediatrician said it would be okay to give the shot to the babies anyway. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I see this all the time, and you are 100% right. What we are taught in medical school is that all those people thinking outside of the box are wrong, that it's just all propaganda. and that these are the facts, this is the science. But man, my eyes were open back in 2001 when I read that book. And I read that book because I had given the traditional 15-month shots, because that's what I was trained to do, one of which was the MMR, to 2 patients at the same time. Interestingly, one was 15 months old, one was 5 years old. And the 15-month-old all of a sudden started having issues with things like making eye contact and having these obsessive behaviors where he was really interested in things that were moving around, especially in circles. And his mom noted a change in behavior at his 18-month visit. And the 5-year-old, the mom brought her back in because she wasn't able to straighten her finger out all the way. And it turned out she had a swollen red joint. When I examined her, we found 2 other joints that were swollen. The elbow, she couldn't straighten it out, and the knee was starting to get red. We diagnosed her with rheumatoid arthritis.
CDC's own data.
Yeah, autoimmune reactions are a real concern. And we just don't know about the long-term effects, not only of all the other vaccines, but also the long-term effects of specifically the mRNA technology. And so I think there's a lot that's still to be developed and revealed. And I think drug companies would be less likely to throw things out here like this if they were held to being sued by the individual people, if in fact we can prove that some of the reactions were due to the vaccines that they received. The other thing too is the number of vaccines that we had when we were kids. Brannon, if you received any vaccines, is literally probably 1/10 the number that they are having to receive now.
Yes, absolutely. Listen to what RFK Jr. said about this to John Stossel. Here we go.
You still say that autism is caused by vaccines?
Yeah, autism is caused by vaccines. And by the way, CDC's own data, you know, they did a study called the Verstratton study in 1989, and they looked at the hepatitis B vaccine. They looked at children, and from the biggest database in the world, the Vaccine Safety Data Link. They looked at children who got the hepatitis B vaccine during their first 30 days, and they compared those to kids who got it later or didn't get it at all. And there was a 1,350% elevated risk for autism among the people who got the vaccine.
There may well be, but there are studies with millions of people. You ignore
you have this wrong. There's a series of about 13 studies that were done by people we call biostitutes. One of them was the leading one, who are people who do these studies for money for CDC, who are paid for by CDC in order to create the illusion that vaccines don't cause autism. The chief scientist was a guy called Paul Thornton, who CDC laid, and his study is the most cited study for this proposition. And Paul Thornton is now a fugitive. He's wanted by Interpol. He stole millions of dollars from CDC that he had claimed to use on this study, but he was building houses, buying motorcycles, and living a life of luxury. And his study is absolute fraud. And yet they have not retracted it because CDC is a dishonest organization. It continues to be cited in the literature. And by the way, John, there are hundreds and hundreds of studies. I've written a book, if you're interested, called Time Aerosol, Let the Science Speak, that has, I think, 1,400 references and over 400 studies cited that link autism and other related neurological injuries to vaccines. There is no question about it. If you actually read the literature, if you listen to what the propaganda that CDC tells you, yeah, vaccines don't cause autism, because it's propaganda. This is a captive agency that is intertwined and owned by the pharmaceutical industry.
Yep. Doctor?
Yeah, you look where the money is in legislation. Look where the money is.
You still say that.
And look where the money is in lawyers who are litigating for the vaccine companies. where the money is spent the most. And technology, for example, also exactly the same thing, with that also being a captured agency. Where the money is, where these lawyers are that are advocating for vaccines and EMF and things like that, that is where you're probably going to find the biggest sources of problems and the largest agencies that are captured by money and greed.
Let's go to this real quick. This is the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Found this chart interesting. Obesity can increase risk of several serious health issues: joint pain, knees and back, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, early puberty, and PCOS in girls, which can lead to infertility, breathing issues and sleep apnea, high risk of cancer, mental health struggles like depression and low self-esteem, obesity. Now they're saying studies that the vast majority of Americans in the next 20 years, the vast majority are going to be obese, which I guess along with that is going to become skyrocketing healthcare costs in America, correct?
Absolutely. In 2019, there was a graph of the United States, and there was one state left that still had obesity rates less than 20%, and that was Colorado. Okay. That has since changed, but that was like the last healthy state to sort of live in, because they do live a healthier, active, outdoor lifestyle, probably, I'm assuming. But yes, there's only 12% of the in the United States, only 12% of people who live here are thought to be metabolically healthy. And Dr. Casey Means, who's the new Surgeon General under the Trump administration, actually wrote a book on cellular health. And it is really, really captivating and good, I think. It's very solid, good information. And it also sort of takes a functional medicine approach to the overall understanding of how cells work. If you can understand how cells work and how to optimize cells, then everything else works better. But here's the caveat with being overweight and obese. When you are obese, you are making an incredible amount of inflammation in your body, and you will never catch up. And when you have inflammation, as you well know, inflammation is the root of everything else. So you're going to see more cancers. You're going to see worse leaky gut. You're going to see more autoimmune diseases. You're going to be more tired. You're going to be more mentally worn out. You're going to have to take that nap in the afternoon every day. It's not worth it. I just did an Instagram post, and my daughter had asked some questions. And one of the questions she asked was, well, do people have a choice to eat healthy or not? I'm like, the real choice is not eat healthy or not. The real choice is, do you want all these diseases or do you want to eat healthy? That's the real choice. Do you want to live a healthy lifestyle, which will then give you the benefits of being more active, having a brain that actually works, not having that afternoon slump, and not having as high of a risk as so many cancers, diabetes, heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, all these things that are life-changing, and I call them life-stealing. If you want a health span, that means you want a long health span. That means you want to live a long number of years, but also be functional a lot during that time. You don't have a choice. You have to be a normal weight, and you have to be metabolically sound. So in our course, Your Thrive Code, we talk a lot about blood sugar regulation, because that's sort of where it really starts. A lot of people don't realize that sugar in the blood acts like a inflammatory sort of toxin. It glycates things, and that causes an incredible amount of inflammation. And if you cannot get that sugar into a cell where then we can make energy out of it, then you're just perpetuating this significant inflammation.
Wow. All right, let's transition before we wrap here. My yogurt, you've sent me some stuff. Tell our audience what you've sent me for my yogurt every day.
Yes, I recommended, I believe either at the end of the last time we talked, just to how to make a little something better. So you were talking about using some yogurt and putting some fruit on top. And I personally like to use this coconut yogurt. It's just got a lot less sugar in it. And I like to keep my blood sugars really nice and even. So I use a coconut-based yogurt, and we talked about adding some healthy omega-3 fats to it. So we talked about adding chia seeds. I wanted to bring this little package I have in my pantry, just in case other people don't know what chia seeds look like. They're just these tiny little black seeds. The one thing you have to remember with chia seeds, if you're going to use them the night before, because you want them to swell up and take in some of that liquid around them. So it'll certainly make the yogurt thicker. If you don't like that, you can add in a little milk alternative. I use Malk, M-A-L-K, milk alternative. It's bad oil free, emulsifier free. So out of all the already made milks, that's the best one. You can thin it out a little bit that way. And then we also talked about adding a little protein to your yogurt. And we love this protein. This is a pure IgG, pure protein from myvitamin.com. This protein is made with whey powder. It's whey powder, which is a dairy-based protein, which is really, really, really good for your body's own ability to make glutathione and other antioxidants. Of course, the problem with whey is there's a lot of dirty whey out there. This whey is super clean. And it's actually made from cows that are in New Zealand. And we use the A2 protein, which is easier for our human bodies to digest.
Excellent. Now, and then again, let's go to my vitamin, no S on that, myvitamin.com/worldview before we talk about a very important topic. You're rewatching The Firm, filmed here in Memphis. Then we'll go. Myvitamin.com/worldview, myvitamin.com/worldview. Anything you want to remind our audience, Dr. Williams, about this?
Yes, I actually, if you don't mind, I would love to read to you what a very smart viewer said. One of your viewers said that he actually said, he had an email for us, but I'm going to just kind of cut to the place where it's important, where he said, I should have been more specific with my question. For the magnesium in particular, my understanding is that the material is likely to have significant amounts of heavy metals depending on where it comes from. Does your testing include heavy metals? Do you have a certificate of authenticity, or what we call a COA, and are you able to share it? And we absolutely do have a certificate of authenticity. This is something that's extremely important to me. This is where early on in my career, I did not recommend vitamins because I didn't know how to check a company out, and I didn't know how to look for contaminants, to look for efficacy, to look for quality, to look for bioavailability. All those things were really important to me before I could make a recommendation. So it hasn't been, except for the last 15 years, that I've actually recommended supplements. And this is a company where I often tell my patients, these are the exact supplements I want you to be on, because if these don't work, I know it's not because the supplements aren't getting into your body and going to where they need to work, that we're missing something else, that there's something else going on that we need to keep investigating. And you have to remember, the patients I see sometimes are very complex. They've already seen 6 doctors. So we're using the best of the best that I'm aware of and that I've actually researched. So yeah, we sent this gentleman a certificate of analysis because it's important to see that what we have is as clean as we can possibly make it.
And then remind them about Worldview, myvitamin.com/worldview, and what they need to be doing and getting there, please.
Yeah, so just go to myvitamin.com/worldview. Please put in the worldview, because we want our partner, Brannon Howse, to have the sales that this show is creating and generating. My joy of coming on this show is really sharing sort of some stories and information and all these things that I've learned over the past 30 years of being in the trenches of seeing patients and still seeing patients to this day. So I really love that, but we really want to support Worldview. So myvitamin.com/worldview. If people want to they don't know what supplements to take, or they don't take any supplements at all, a good one to get started on is any of the foundationals. The men's foundational, the women's foundational, the women's foundational plus 50. We added a special highly absorbed calcium that has other minerals in it that actually help support bone loss. And also we have a teenager/college kid pack that is great for our younger kiddos.
Excellent, excellent. Real quick question. Have you seen the Netflix documentary on the Tylenol murders? Remember that back in the early 80s? Have you seen that documentary?
I have not seen the documentary, but I definitely remember the Tylenol contamination and that just sort of went through a whole entire change in how we allow medications to be sold over the counter in terms of being tamper resistant and things like that.
I watched it the other night. Let me show you the trailer real quick, if you don't mind. It was super fascinating to me, and I think you'll see why. Here, watch this.
I was 8 years old. I remember my mom coming out of the bathroom and saying, "I feel weird."
They said, "My brother Aaron got a heart attack." I says, "What are you talking about? He's a very healthy person."
Paula was murdered. She was just murdered. The next I know, I'm watching my mom go out on a stretcher.
These are not all heart attacks. Something's killing them.
There were 6 capsules missing, and there are 3 victims. I said, it has to be Tylenol.
It was a new way for a mass murder.
Tylenol.
You found cyanide in Tylenol.
Innocent people were poisoned to death for no reason. There was terror, there was fear.
This product may be contaminated.
Nothing to this magnitude had ever happened before.
Don't use Tylenol.
What kind of person did this?
James Lewis, he's a real-life boogeyman.
You think I'm going to open this and get my fingerprints all over it?
When it comes to the FBI, he was their obsession. He was the only one they thought did it.
The investigation was problematic from the start.
Why are we not digging and asking more questions?
There was really only one way out of this crisis, and that was for them to be seen as a victim of a madman.
So if anyone asks me if I still use Tylenol, my answer is yes.
They're barking up the wrong tree. They will never solve the Tylenol homicides.
Now the product is triple sealed. There is absolutely no reason that this could ever happen again, but it happens.
The entire narrative suddenly looks a little more suspect.
You have to follow the evidence, wherever the evidence takes you.
Yeah, fascinating, because the documentary claims that it was triple sealed, and yet it happened again after it was triple sealed. There were so many questions I had after watching this documentary. I would be interested, when you have the time or when you're traveling or something, could watch it on your iPad or smartphone or something. And then we can talk about it, because to me, I don't know. I came away with I was always led to believe that it was some guy that did it, and he's mentioned there. But so many people in the documentary said, no, this guy didn't do it, and which leads you down a trail of, wait a minute, how did it then happen again if it's triple sealed according to the documentary? And it's kind of like, wait a minute, pharmaceutical companies, these manufacturers of medical products and medicines, and then COVID-19. It's I was now looking at it through the eyes of 2025 back. And I'd be interested to see your response after watching that documentary.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch it. It's very interesting. That type of stuff is very interesting to me. But, I think this is where you go back to the supplements, and this is why we have third party and our own company that double and triple checks our products, because we don't want to take chances. And ours are, like we said before, 40% of our raw material is rejected if it doesn't meet our standard. But then even after that, we are third party checked on a regular basis. And that is something that we impose on ourselves, not because the government is imposing that on us. And we have our own standards for what clean is, because like I said, we're a professional grade supplement place. We're not a over the counter, you can't just get this from anywhere type of a facility.
Okay, in closing, you watched The Firm. It was filmed here in Memphis. We talked about it last week. What did you think? Had you seen it before?
I had seen it before, and I had seen it many years before. So there were little bits and pieces that I remember, but I just thought, man, it's so interesting taking a fresh new look at it, especially now that my brain processes things differently. You know, whereas before I was more involved, I actually paid more attention to sort of the love story than I did the actual law part of it. And this time I really paid more attention to that. But yeah, I thought that was really well done. Obviously, a great movie, and just great to look at some of the places in Memphis. So now when I come there, I'll actually be on the lookout for those places.
Well, you actually can go to a website and they will direct you to all the places where it was filmed, and you can go to those restaurants and those sites and those locations. It does show off Memphis very well. And by the way, Kash Patel, the FBI director, is sending in a special crew to help clean up Memphis. So I think we're going to see some great improvement in Memphis. Not that there's a real problem in Memphis for the average person, because most of the crime is bad people onto bad people, people doing things they shouldn't be doing. A lot of it's retaliatory, drug gang going at each other, and it happens in the bad parts of town. But even so, we still want all that cleaned up. And now I guess Kash Patel's sitting in a special team to clean up Memphis, which will be good for all of us. But yeah, look forward to having you here in Memphis in October at our conference. And we'll look forward to finding out, text me if you will, where I need to go here in the Memphis area to get my blood done. And we'll get that done, sent up to you. And then we'll look forward to doing a show sometime in after the middle of August. We'll come up to O'Fallon and do a whole show on this.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. We'd love to have you.
My Vitamin. Let's do it. My Vitamin, no S there, myvitamin.com/worldview, myvitamin.com/worldview. Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thank you so much for having me here. Have a blessed day.
You too. We'll be right back after this break. All right, joining me now is Michael Weiner, Wes Peters. J.D. Vance gave a speech this week. Listen to what he said about cryptocurrency. Here we go.
Here that we're talking about genuine, ground-up innovation, one that's already improving the well-being of tens of millions of our fellow citizens. I believe it's 50 million Americans own Bitcoin, and I believe that's going to be 100 million before too long. But it's not just about Bitcoin and about the value that's been generated, the wealth that's been generated by so many millions of our fellow citizens. Through decentralized finance, crypto has transformed how Americans transact with one another. It's expanded access to banking for many who may not otherwise have had it. And every single day, I feel like I see some groundbreaking new use of blockchain tech, whether it's in supply chain management, whether it's in hospitals, or whether it's in changing how we track and store patients' private health records. But for each of these new forward-looking applications, I also feel like there's an incredibly value-conservative element to crypto technology, and that's as a hedge. Crypto is a hedge against bad policymaking from Washington, no matter what party is in control. It's a hedge against skyrocketing inflation, which has eroded the savings rate of Americans over the last 4 years. And as you all know well, It's a hedge against a private sector that's increasingly willing to discriminate against consumers on the basis of their basic beliefs, including their politics. That includes, of course, debanking users for Second Amendment advocacy or for ties to the first Trump administration. In Canada, the government did the same to kill those big truck driver protests in 2022. Less than a week later, they succeeded. The protests were over. But maybe most importantly, I see crypto as a hedge against one of the most dangerous trends in the digital era in both the public and private sector. And that's of elites who, rather than innovate themselves, prefer to simply take over and co-opt cutting-edge technologies to assert their control over other people. And I know we believe this in this room. That's not Bitcoin. It'll never be Bitcoin. And you guys are going to make sure that happens.
Wow. A very, very interesting statements there. Decentralized, a power, hedge against bad policy and inflation, hedge against private sector cancel culture, debanking, hedge against elites and their control. It sounds like to me, Wes Peters, that whether it's the tariffs, and now we've got another court ruling in favor of Donald Trump today on that, whether it's tariffs, which is to set up external revenue service and maybe get rid of the IRS, which is, again, a real attack on the Federal Reserve, their 1913 scam, the Internal Robbery Service, robbing from Americans, taking their money that's not rightfully theirs to take, and then giving it to their friends, their politicians, their special interest groups, their terrorist buddies around the world, and their failed environmental policies and green energy and any other boondoggle they can come up with. If we are to see the neutering of the Federal Reserve, the end of the IRS, you've got to get rid of the Federal Reserve first. You cannot let these guys sit here, as they're doing now, hijacking the economy and refusing to lower the interest rates to get the economy going and housing and everything going again. So it sounds like to me between tariffs and crypto of some kind, from my conversations up on the Hill 2 weeks ago with Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Tommy Tuberville, these guys talked about that. They talked about if we want to defund the deep state, we've got to do these things with the tariffs. I think this plays right into it. What say you, Wes?
Well, J.D. Vance, Vice President, is 100% correct that that blockchain technology, crypto, is definitely here to stay. It's not going anywhere. But I think it's going to be a very tough battle for them to, look at Elon Musk. He just found out how difficult fighting the deep state can be. You know, he's leaving the Trump administration and put up with a lot of abuse with his company and everything. So it's going to be very difficult, I think, for them to do away with the Federal Reserve and head into a 100% crypto space. But that could be exactly where we're heading. And I think you got to factor in all of these things, though. Right now, there's really little to no regulation whatsoever. The volatility, there would have to be a new complete framework put into place. And I think it's going to be a fight. But the days of the dollar are numbered, absolutely. And we do need to do something to get rid of all this corruption, including the deep state, the Federal Reserve, all of them.
Mm-hmm. He talks about hedge against elites' control. Michael Weiner, isn't that what you've been talking about when you talk about gold, silver, being outside the system? You're taking away the elite's ability to control your life.
First of all, I don't agree with everything that Vice President Vance said. I'm a little bit disturbed by what he said, quite honestly, because there's a lot of misinformation in there. I think cryptocurrency does have a place in our economy. First of all, it's not regulated. Most of the guys that deal with it are either criminals, terrorists, or kidnappers right now. Now, they've created an industry that this government is trying to sit back and take control of, because if they don't, the foreign entities will, including China. There is a place for crypto, there's a place for blockchain, but they are not going to walk in and replace the dollar. The American people aren't going to go for it. And that's just naive. What is important for the and the elites are the ones right now that are controlling it. They created a totally unregulated industry. First, before they start making it a currency, they better regulate it and put some rules surrounding it to protect everyday Americans, period. Once they do that, then we can sit back and start playing with it in a manner that makes sense, because right now, none of these companies have any guidelines on this. So I think there's a place for cryptocurrencies. I don't think it's a hedge against inflation. I think it's a financial instrument and a means of exchange that can replace the dollar, like Wes said, and various different means of transfer. I think it's a good way of making the Federal Reserve benign, because the Federal Reserve was supposed to be a nonpartisan entity. And as you know, Brannon, you've been saying it for years, they are totally partisan. The big change in the Federal Reserve will be coming January 1st of next year, when Trump fires, and he can fire Jerome Powell and replace him, and he'll put in his person, and that's when the changes will start. And it's going to get interesting. But I think that the dollar right now, and what Basant goes for, and he said it openly, is a Bretton Woods type of currency or economy that's backed by tangible assets. But cryptocurrency is not a tangible asset. So it is a transferable money means, and it gives you the capability of offsetting using dollars by agreeable amounts of dollars that can be used in cryptos and various different types. However, until it is regulated by the government, there's no controls. So it's a risk factor. I'm waiting to see what they do when they fully regulate it, so I can be able to make intelligent comments about it. But I think that there is a place for it. I agree with that. I just don't agree with some of his theory of how it's going to be all-encompassing, because it's not going to be. It's going to be a transferable means of exchange to replace the use of dollars, and use that as a means of transfer between countries. I don't know between countries as much as between companies. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. But we're not going to stick around with paper money. I mean, eventually, paper money is going away. So there's going to have to be some kind of federal digital currency, right?
Right.
Correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it'll be a combination of a digital currency and a crypto together. Once they regulate that and introduce a new currency and make the Federal Reserve benign. You know, you talked about, Brannon, about the situation about tariffs sitting back and being able to eliminate the federal taxation. And quite honestly, if you listen to the inaugural address that Thomas Jefferson did in the early 1800s, he stated, "I do not need to tax my fellow Americans. We make our money off our tariffs." And every industrial revolution this country has had tariffs that legitimately supported us. This fear of tariffs is ridiculous. It's a positive for us. And we have to look at, you have mentioned previously, as positive ways to build the economy. And you build the economy by making money. The United States of America should be making money. And we make money with tariffs. Why not? And that goes against debt. And that's what we should be looking at. I agree with you.
Wes, what do you want to jump in?
Well, just on the cryptocurrency and replacing the dollar, like Michael said, the regulation isn't there right now, so they have to implement all the regulation and get rid of the corruption, the scams, and when we go to a digital currency, at that point, as we've mentioned before, you can kiss all privacy goodbye. They can control your wealth, what you can buy, what you can't buy. We've talked before
when
about
it comes to crypto. I think
Correct. Yep. Social credit scores. Oh, your carbon footprint's too high. Now you get to pay a carbon tax because you bought that diesel truck and that gas stove. So again, the idea of having, your wealth tied to this digital platform that relies on electricity with very little to no regulation right now, it's very, very concerning. And that's why I always say, I say time and time again, have some of your money outside the traditional banking system and outside of the U.S. dollar, and nothing does that for you like physical gold and silver.
And the other thing, Brandon, go ahead. I'm sorry, I was going to say
Floridian, look at this.
The Florida situation, exactly what you're talking about.
DeSantis approves law allowing gold, silver as legal tender. Okay, this, I guess, the DeSantis-backed measure, HB 999, recognizes gold and silver coins as legal tender to pay down debts incurred after July 1st, 2026.
All right.
Michael?
Here's the deal with all of this, and you've been saying it, Brannon, brilliantly for years, and we're laying into it. With what you're talking about with cryptos, digital, what Wes just mentioned brilliantly is the fact that right now they're trying to track us. What gold and silver does by these states offering it as a legal tender of currency gives you the capability of using it as a means of paying each other and illegally accepting it, period. Now, what type of gold and silver coins you deal with is what's important, because the laws that govern reportability and all the rest will still be in effect. Don't be naive to think that there's going to be some sort of change. That's why one time when we did a show a long time ago, I held up a $5 gold piece. And I said, I carry this around all the time. And I assure you that we will have a lot of people looking at their portfolios saying, what should I own? I had somebody today mention that. And I would not change in owning anything that doesn't offer you privacy, like Wes said. But I would also remember for those people that are playing games right now and taking a tremendous amount of risk, when Wes and I predicted what's going on this year, we've got a trifecta coming up in July, a trifecta economically. We've got the reset in Rio, where the Chinese are pushing themselves to try to be a world reserve currency, and they've got gold all over, footprinting everywhere. It's not cryptocurrencies, it's gold. Going into their digital dollar, going into their SWIFT system, going into their own money, and tying it into the BRICS nation. Then you've got the situation with the Basel III beginnings, where that in and of itself is going to force banks. And one thing, Brandon, that nobody's mentioned is these banks that are holding paper gold are going to have to get rid of that and replace it. So when they sell it and then buy it, it's going to create an automatic push in the market. It's going to be crazy. And then finally, the United States finishing this audit of the Fort Knox. All of these issues are going to push gold, and we're going to see $4,000 gold. I'm moving it up to November 1st. Okay? We're going to see $4,000 gold. And the people who are sitting back and telling us, that viewers out there, well, gold's high right now, good luck. You're going to regret it in about 9 months, and you're also going to regret your opportunity to protect more of your dollars, because the banks are shutting all of these neighborhood branches down because they want to force digital banking like you've talked about for years, Brannon. They want to sit back and track every move you make. You pay your bills online, say hello to Uncle Sam. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Wes, gold today is at about 33.18. Silver is what, 33.39. What do you see coming toward by the end of the year? Michael just said November 1st, $4,000 now it's gold.
Yeah, I see gold is $181 off of its high from this year, so it's on sale for those that think they missed the boat. Smart investors buy on the dips. We've got gold $181 off of its high. Silver is $16.54 off of its 1980 high of $49.95, so buying opportunities for sure. And I could very easily see $4,000 an ounce gold. July 1st, Basel III, they're making, gold is going to be a tier 1 investment. It was a tier 3 investment before. By being a tier 3 investment, they could only account for 50% of that gold on paper, the gold on paper. They could only account for 50% of that value as their reserve assets. Now that it's a tier 1 asset on par with the U.S. Treasuries, the dollar, and government bonds, they get to count 100% of that physical. This only pertains to physical, not paper, the physical metal. And so that's going to entice these banks to get out of the paper market and get into the physical market because they can count 100% of that towards their assets available. As a matter of fact, let me take a look here. JP Morgan just recently this year, JP Morgan Chase transported approximately 30 million troy ounces of gold, valued at around $4 billion from London to New York. So they're bringing their from London back here, and more central banks, U.S. banks, institutions are going to be getting out of those paper contracts and wanting to hold physical metal, because there's a big advantage to that. If they can count 100% of that value towards their reserve assets, it's a no-brainer. And what that means for all of us and the viewers is that that's going to significantly increase the demand for physical metal. So the prices, there are a number of things that are going to drive these prices higher. So for those that still think they missed the boat, like I said, you have not missed the boat. You need to do your homework, your due diligence, and get some of your money outside the system.
Absolutely.
Go right here, folks, worldviewgold.com, worldviewgold.com, right, top right-hand corner. Just click more information. It'll bring you down to the bottom of the page where you just fill out the form, and it'll be on its way. Free, no risk, no pay obligation here. There's just no obligation, and it's free, right? So what do you got to lose? To get some free information, read up, find out about precious metals, that's bullion, freshly minted gold and silver, numismatic, 1933 and older, or putting gold into your IRA. You can learn about all of that when you get the free packet at worldviewgold.com, or you can text Wes at 602-558-8585, 602-558-8585. Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey, Brandon, real quick, one thing I forgot to mention is anyone that's interested, we just came out with a new white paper on this Basel III. So if anyone wants that white paper, reach out to us. Got some good information on that that'll explain it more clearly, more thoroughly. We'll be happy to get it out to you. Free of charge.
Just text Wes, guys. Tell him you want the free report, 602-558-8585. Text him your name and address. He'll ship it to you free of charge. 602-558-8585. Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey,
Thank you. Brandon. Bye, Dolly, wherever you are. Bye.
She's laying here to my side. All right, that's our broadcast tonight. But before we go, don't forget about getting your free packet of business cards, packs of 20. We've now shipped out over 15,000 of these. Many of you are giving them out. Thank you for doing that. It's a great way to promote our network to folks. What do they get to lose? It's free to watch, right? Give them those free business cards as you move around your town. Just waiters, waitress, the people that cut your hair, whoever you run in contact with, you think might enjoy a network like Worldview Tube. Give them some of these, give them one or two of these, and then when you run out, you can order more at worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. Don't forget about our fall conference coming up too. Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th, the optional concert banquet Thursday night. I'll have my grand piano player. I'll have a strings, writing in strings this year, a small orchestra, if you will. And Hadia will be a keynote speaker for our banquet. That's that Thursday night. All of it's at worldviewstore.com, whether you want tickets for the banquet and or the conference itself. You don't have to come to the banquet, but you certainly should. There are two different events. Friday night is our foundation banquet concert speaker. And then Friday night gets underway with all the regular speakers, Friday night and Saturday. Full details at worldviewstore.com. We only have 350 seats in the auditorium, so you want to get registered if you really want to attend. Again, worldviewstore.com. If you'd like to register by phone, you can leave a voicemail for Melissa or text her, and she'll gladly take your reservation over the phone for tickets. Her number is 901-825-0652, 901-825-0652. And again, as always, please remember, we are brought to you by you. It is your generosity. If you go to worldviewfoundation.com, spell it right, Brannon. Worldview, no, it's just worldviewfoundation.com. There it is. Worldviewfoundation.com. Remember, we're pushing it all out for free. We could put everything behind a paywall, but we don't. Keeping ministry and education front and center. But we are a listener-supported network. There's two ways we do this, folks. Our sponsors, who only pay us when you do business with them, and then your contributions at our foundation. We've got to bring in over 40 grand a month to keep it all going. And as I often say, that doesn't even include my salary. And I got to make a living. That's just my hard cost to keep this network going. With the guys in the control room and about $8,000 or so in bandwidth bill and storage of those files, because so many people are watching this network and we have to pay for the bandwidth bills. We're glad they're watching, but we got to pay for the bandwidth bills. So if you appreciate this broadcast service and ministry, please support us through our foundation that helps us push this out. Think of us as your conservative worldview alternative to National Public Radio, National Public Television. WorldviewFoundation.com, WorldviewFoundation.com. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. All right? We also will have for you very soon some more of the history documentaries, like the one on Ronald Reagan we did a week ago Friday. We go tomorrow. More of those coming. We have a lot of stuff in the can to produce as we build up our Worldview History channel as well. So many of you are excited about that. We are as well, all made possible by you. So thank you for your support. May God save America. Take care.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon Howse.
And welcome. Glad you're with us on this May